Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode.
Hi, everyone. This is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer here at the Brandon Hall Group. And I was fortunate enough to catch up with Graham Glass, who is the CEO and founder of CYPHER Learning. How are you, Graham?
I'm doing great, Michael.
Glad to have you. I know you're super busy, globetrotting around the world, getting out there, talking about the benefits of GenAI and learning. I think it's really interesting where this is all going, and it's a real pleasure to have an expert like yourself that's really been in on the ground floor a lot of this GenAI and where's it all going. And there's a lot of people in our audience that really wants to know what are the ins and outs, things to think about, things to be careful about when it comes to using GenAI and creating learning. And most importantly, a roundup of the technology. Where's it all going? Who's using what? We were just talking in the green room that, there's these 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8, 9 versions coming out. Seems like now once a month. Where do you want to start? How do you want to help us all out in understanding what this exciting but, very fast-moving landscape?
Well, what I'd love to share with your audience is a little bit of my personal adventure with GenAI, because it has been an adventure, that's for sure. My whole life I've really been into AI, and I used to think about it way before ChatGPT came on the scene, but there really wasn't anything particularly impressive going on. And then suddenly, out of the blue, comes ChatGPT, and that kind of changed everyone's perspective. So I remember at CYPHER Learning thinking, well, obviously, this could be a real boon for education in general, business education, higher ed, you name it. But it wasn't obvious, how good is this stuff? So I remember just sitting down at a computer one evening, just noodling around, and I start with, I think I asked it like, what's 2 + 2? And it goes 4. It's like, okay, that's a good start. And it didn't say 5. And then as I started asking it deeper and deeper questions, I was just constantly amazed by how good it was. And then I said to ChatGPT, teach me linear algebra. So it wasn't just a question. It wasn't, what's the capital of Sweden?
Mm-hmm.
I actually started using the Socratic method to teach me linear algebra. And that's when it's like, oh, okay, this is serious stuff. And as a company, we decided, let's focus on course creation first. Because it's like an obvious place to start and it has an obvious high value. But we learn a lot by focusing on course creation. And I'll share with your listeners just my biggest insight, and then I'll pause so you can, give me some guidance on what to talk about next. But I used to be an educator, and I used to teach computer science at University of Texas, Dallas. And when I built my courses, I would spend a few hours trying to figure out what direction am I going to take with this course? Because there's lots of different ways to teach somebody something. And once I committed to a specific course and a certain direction, then I spent hundreds of hours building out that course. And if I started in the wrong direction, that wasn't a good thing. I'd be wasting a lot of time. And once we realized that you can actually build a pretty nice course, and I'd never say 100%, let's just say 80%, in a relatively small amount of time, the biggest insight that I got is this can enable rapid iterative development of educational content. So rather than committing to a course and then spending hundreds of hours, I could say, I want to build 5 different versions of the same course in 20 minutes. And so although a lot of people focus on, it can save time and save money, for me, the biggest thing was it now allows rapid iterative development for educational content. And I'm an engineer, so I'm used to rapid development in code, but this is rapid development in educational content. So that was the first big insight that I got that wasn't obvious.
Now, when you talk about these insights, how do you translate these insights, like you just brought up, Graham, into how does it impact me as a learning and development professional? So I have an instructional design background, working with an authoring tool, and now you're introducing this idea, like, where do I even get started? How do I even approach it? What do I point it at?
Yeah.
And I think
Well,
that's what people want to know.
yeah, I mean, without sounding like too much of a salesperson, one of the things that CYPHER tried to do is to make Gen AI really, really easy to use for the end user.
Mhm.
So many people, it's like, well, how to write chat GBT prompts or how to do, it's like, you shouldn't really have to know any of that stuff to take advantage of Gen AI. So we try to do it, make it super easy. So you basically, without going into detail, say, I want to build a course.
Mhm.
And then you have chat boxes and, it basically fill out a form. And we make it so you can nudge it in certain directions. Like, for example, when I was teaching, I was really a big fan of project-based learning. That was kind of my style. And that's what I got a reputation for. Hey, Graham makes really fun courses because he introduces really good projects. And I don't want to lose that. If I'm an L&D person, I want it to come across like it's still Graham building these courses. So what we did is we packaged up the functionality so you could nudge it. You could say, build me a course about X, but you could say, and also include 3 project-based learning things that are really fun and creative or something like that. Yeah, and you fill in all the blanks. Now, we're really into, skills-based learning. So if I say I want to teach the following 20 skills, you can tell it that. Or you can say, hey, I want to build a course about a certain thing, and I want the AI to come up with what are the 20 skills that are going to be taught. So when it builds the course, it's not just building a bare bones course. It's actually building the modules, synthetic imagery, digital voiceover, skills-based learning. All of that stuff gets generated for you in less than 15 minutes. So I would say, if you know how to fill in a form, then basically you know how to use CYPHER Learning to build a course. But proof is in the pudding. Once you actually see this in action, it is pretty jaw-dropping. And my jaw still drops, and I was one of the people who built it.
So I want to make sure I heard you right. Then, just so that the audience is probably like listening and now they're kind of like leaning into their computer right now. Did you say 10 to 15 minutes to build a course?
Yes. And by the way, that's not easy to do. So if you just wanted to use ChatGPT outside of our platform, then you would be typing prompts for 5 hours, 6 hours straight. But one of the things that we did when we first designed what we call CYPHER Copilot, not to be confused with Microsoft Copilot, by the way, it's a separate, distinct product. We decided that it's really important for it to work fast. Because the whole point about this thing is to save you tons of time and to allow iterative development. So what we do is that we try and talk with AIs in parallel whenever we can. So when you're building a course, at any one moment in time, it might be talking 15 to 20 different prompts in the background simultaneously. And it's a bit like doing a jigsaw in parallel where you've got 10 people around the table all putting pieces into the jigsaw, and within 15 minutes, you've assembled the whole course. But yeah, around 15 minutes is pretty accurate.
So that's end to end, like I could take the course.
Well, so one of the things we're really careful about is to not oversell Gen AI. So it does occasionally make mistakes. And what I found, because I use Copilot a lot, it tends to make mistakes in areas where there is not that much content on the public sphere. So, like, there were one of my favorite old cartoons is called Thunderbirds, and there's one episode where there's very little material on the net. And when I asked it to build that course, it made a few mistakes. So what we're saying is it'll build 80% of a course in about 15 minutes, which I think as it should be. We're not attempting to get rid of L&D people at all. The general idea is to allow you to spend your time more productively. I personally use GenAI for a lot of stuff, not just developing courses. I use it for marketing and for sales and for legal, etc. But I'm always the person who's making the final decision. So the general idea is take a lot of the grind out of building a course, provide enough packaged AI where you can nudge it in very creative and engaging directions, let it do the grunt work, and then you go in and then you go ahead and make it yours. So you might add additional sections, edit certain sections, add your own video. There's a lot you can do. Now, I also want to talk about private data, but I know you're going to bring that up. So I'll just stick to the public data and we'll talk about private shortly.
That's a great place to go. But before we go there, you said something that was pretty interesting, which I think is a good time to start talking about it, is we're not talking that right now or ever do we want this to be a replacement for people. Like, this is where artificial intelligence meets human intelligence, right? So how does an instructional designer, someone who's in the learning and development group, that is a creator, how do you work through all of that? Like, where do you weigh in? Is it becoming a prompt expert? Is it reading it afterwards? Is it iterations? Like, how do you add in the human intelligence to make sure that you get it to where you want to get to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'll respond to that in the way that I would have used it if I was still teaching computer science. And I taught computer science in corporate world and higher ed world. And if I look at a particular course that I would teach, I would say at least 80% of it was what you might call bread and butter. It's like, I don't have that much influence on how Unix permission system works. I can't make that fun. Sorry, everyone. But I can make the projects really good fun. And I can share anecdotes that will connect the technical stuff that I'm teaching with the human aspect. Like, how did I use this set of functionality personally to make money, as an example? So I think, putting on an L&D hat, what you would typically do is you would provide the broad brushstrokes when you fill in the form. Like, here's the kind of course that I want to build. You let it generate the vast percentage of the bread and butter, and then you go in and you make little tweaks where there's like something was a little bit off and you want to improve it. But you're typically going to insert quite a lot of your own projects, your own anecdotes. You might have some specific things for your company. So while it might have generated something a bit more generic, you might want to go and replace a generic section with a specific example from your organization. But the nice thing is you take all the time that you would have spent building the bread and butter, and now you can spend all of that time adding all of the stuff that you really value highly. You're going to have a lot more time to do that. You're going to have to waste a lot less time on the bread and butter.
And the quality of that bread and butter has gotten a lot better. I mean, it's tremendous how much has changed in less than 2 years. You can really get very far. But let's talk about the very far, right?
Yeah.
And you brought it up earlier, because I'm going very far, but how far am I really going? So talk to us about the whole privacy, not infringing on somebody's copyright or trademark, like all the stuff that, that people talk about that's on the other side of the coin. And how do we safeguard ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, so that goes back to the adventurous side of GenAI, which is when CYPHER started working on this stuff, the first version of our Copilot was limited to the public domain. And it does an extraordinarily good job. I mean, I hazard a guess, although we haven't done any particular research, that a professional might also make mistakes when they're generating a course. And that's why most courses go through a review process to fix the author's mistakes. So I don't really even know whether an AI makes more mistakes or not, but it makes some. So we focused on the public domain. We did a lot of tuning of prompts and efficiency, etc. And we also added support for things like synthetic imagery. So for example, if you're concerned about copyright, you can tell Copilot generate AI imagery and it will use a separate AI service for generating synthetic imagery, which doesn't violate any copyrights for sure. But, companies might oftentimes will recommend images, but if you're not comfortable with that image, you just replace it with your own. But one of the first things that happened was our customers were kind of blown away by how good it was. But then the next question is, but how do I build a course now using my existing 2 gigabyte video or my PDF or my PowerPoint or my Microsoft document? So that was what we did in Copilot 2, which is in production. So you can upload your own content, and we do all kinds of cool things behind the scenes that I can talk about if you really want to analyze that data and build a course just on your data. So it's going to try really, really hard not to pull data from the internet, and it's going to pull almost all the content from whichever files you give it. And you could give it more than one file. Here are 2 PDFs. Build a course on how to manage a nuclear reactor, and it will. I didn't just make that up. That's actually one of the test cases we use, and it will assemble a really nice course with all the trimmings that I mentioned, but using your data. One of the things we have found out is that the AI tries really hard to please. So if you say, build me a 10-module course, and you give it a 1-page PDF, it will most likely start pulling in some public data to try and keep you happy. So, and we document these best practices though, like make sure you're giving it enough data so it doesn't go out like a little puppy dog and retrieve stuff from the public internet. So that's one thing that we do. And when it's doing that, it's typically not going to make mistakes because it's actually using existing private information. We use AI services that guarantee that none of that data is ever used for training and it's all deleted right away. So no one who uses our service has to be worried about that. There's one very cool feature that we're already working on, so it probably won't be long until we release it, called AI Crosscheck. And what that feature will do is it uses one AI as the primary generation of text, and it uses another AI to read the content, and it's from a different company, so it's not using the same training data. And it'll use a second AI, and if they find anything contentious, and when it generates the course, it will automatically draw a box around it, tell you why it found contentious, so that a human reviewer can either say, yeah, it's okay, let it through, or delete, or let me go in and edit something. So the general idea is to try and use all of these new AI powers to avoid these kind of things, and once again, lessen the burden on the human.
So let's talk more about your platform, because you put a lot of time and energy into it. So is your team. And clearly you've got a very strong background in this, been at it for a long time. What are the best use cases for CYPHER Learning at this point?
Yeah, so there's the use cases as of right now. There might be different use cases by the end of this year, but for right now, it's basically going to be somebody who wants to save a huge amount of time and energy building courses. So like we're slap bang in forced development with the Copilot 1 and then the subsequent Copilot 2. So that's the primary. It's not going to grade people's papers. It's not going to do any of that kind of stuff. It's going to be for someone who wants to create course materials. And so, for example, if you're in an L&D department, and as we all know, they have a great budget. They're usually understaffed. We know all the problems and challenges. This could be a lifesaver, where suddenly now you can accelerate the rate that you deliver courses. They can be more timely. You can update them more often. You can relieve some of the stress that you might be feeling in your life. And also, compliance. There's a lot of industries out there where they're heavily regulated. They're not off-the-shelf courses that you can get from a course vendor. They're like nuclear regulatory agency or water regulatory agency. something like our platform can hugely help in those cases because it can generate great, engaging courses, modern courses from whatever existing materials you've got. Because otherwise, those things are going to have to be built by hand because they're so specific.
Now, multiple people working together to build content, is that possible? Yeah. Having a
Oh
bunch of
yeah,
people
yeah,
away at the same
absolutely.
time?
I mean,
How's
I
that
think
work?
so. So, and a lot of it depends on how you kind of divvy up your team. So, for example, let's just say that somebody has to build a learning path. We're going to be building these 5 courses that you run through. Maybe it's an onboarding sequence. Maybe it's a upskilling sequence. So you might have one person who said, I'm going to use Copilot to rapidly generate 10 to 15 courses that are candidates. And then the ones that look best, they go through a little committee. They decide, yeah, these are the 3 best courses in their area. That could be then handed over to someone who was a domain expert who then took those courses and run with them. Or depending on how big your L&D team is, you might have one person working one of the courses, another person working another course, operating in parallel. And in fact, one of the features that we're working on is the ability to take an existing course that was not built by Copilot and upgrade it. So rewrite sections of it, tag things with skills, gamify it, etc. But those are the kind of the investments that we're making into course generation. Another thing that we're investigating, we haven't committed yet to, is theoretically Copilot could automatically create you an entire learning path. So you could theoretically say, I want to build an MBA program, and it could suggest, here are the 15 courses that you might want to include in your MBA as mandatory, and these 5 as optional. And once you work with the AI to determine, yeah, that's the program I want, it actually builds the entire MBA using the same technology. So it's not just necessarily about building 1 or 2 courses. This has the potential to build entire programs.
Last question for you. So we've talked about GenAI from the standpoint of really helping with the scaling, going faster, quicker to our endpoint. Have you seen it actually improve the learning itself?
Well, so our customers predominantly tell us that not only this is saving time and money, but the end users are really enjoying it as well.
Okay.
And, you and I have both seen what some courses look like. There's a lot of really bad stuff out there. It's like very dull. It's not gamified. It's not particularly precise. The imagery looks bad. It's like what the cat dragged home. And the nice thing with Copilot is it always generates really engaging, nice looking courses. So, we can only base it on the feedback that we're getting from our customers, but our customers generally seem really happy with this stuff. Now, I do want to mention to your audience, we're working on GenAI beyond building courses. We've got some much more ambitious plans in play, but in terms of what the CYPHER platform currently supports, it's certainly focused on building really engaging courses very quickly.
Well, Graham, I can tell that it's really a lot of progress that's happened with GenAI. Like, you make it so clear, but it's also very exciting what you're doing with your platform as well. And I encourage our audience to be able to really take a look at what CYPHER Learning is doing. And I think it's one of those rare instances where they can learn about the technology itself through a technology provider that's kind of leading the charge in this space. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I certainly feel that way. Like, I really enjoy presenting to audiences in all spheres of life because I really feel like we're really going to help them to save time and energy. And I will say, if you do go to cypherlearning.com, right front and center of the webpage is an actual kind of live example of what this stuff can do. So you can get an experience of what's possible very, very quickly.
And I think you also help our audience to understand that there is room for human intelligence and artificial intelligence to coincide. In fact, we need humans to make sure that we get the right outcome, we get the intended outcome that we're looking for. And so this isn't a replacement strategy, but a new kind of symbiotic relationship between
Yeah,
technology and humans.
I totally agree. And time again, all the psychological studies show that people really enjoy connecting and learning with other people. So yeah, so this stuff is not about replacing people, but it's allowing them to spend a lot more time in the stuff they do best and to relieve a lot of the drudgery that's typically involved.
Well, we look forward to checking in with you a few months from now. We'll do a follow-up podcast, see what you're up to, and beyond, as you put it, the beyond the content creation. That was a great clip.
Oh yeah, that'll be a fun one. And it's always a pleasure chatting with you, Michael.
You as well, Graham. Graham Glass, CEO, founder of CYPHER Learning. Check them out. And you can always ask us more questions about this podcast by writing to us at success@brandonallgroup.com.